But it says that after you've had your fill, everything else that is left doesn't belong to you. Even if you own it, it belongs to the poor. And so that's the way that the church thinks, and it's not really the way that Webb seems to be thinking.
It's not over.
Wait, we are out of time.
Welcome to Conversation on Tap, a podcast that seeks to promote intelligent dialogue in an age of echo chambers and self-segregation. Pull up a stool, pour a glass of tasty beer, and join us each week as we discuss all the topics that you were told not to discuss in polite company. My name is Jose.
And my name is Christina.
And this week we will be continuing our discussion with Sam Rocha about socialism, as well as several other issues, including race. But first, what do we have on tap?
Well, what do we have on tap?
So I went and bought a 6-pack of Guinness Extra Stout.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really good.
I was in the mood for Guinness.
Yes.
So I'm the one that actually suggested that you get Guinness because it's been a minute.
It has been. I used to love going to the bar back when bars were open.
Yeah.
And getting a pint of Guinness out of the tap.
It's like a meal in itself.
Yeah, and it would have that foamy head at the top. And if it was a really good bartender, they could make like a 4-leaf or 3-leaf clover on top of the foam.
Nice.
Yeah, it was. Oh, those were the days. But I don't go to bars. Then now, with the whole coronavirus, the bars are closed anyway.
So we've got to just have our own little bar here.
Yeah.
Share your beer in summer scorch, though unheard that secret rhythm is to blame for love, and schism is to blame for all emissions.
Now, the segment of our show that we call Fred Talks. In this segment of our show, Christina and I will each share one thing that we are passionate about for about 2 minutes, though we tend to be long-winded, so that isn't a strict time limit. This week, I'm going to discuss a disturbing video that I watched recently, and I actually showed you part of it. On June 25th, a pro-life activist / celebrity named Abby Johnson posted a video on her YouTube channel entitled My Biracial Boy. Now, she's famous for having been a former employee of Planned Parenthood who had a conversion, and now she's kind of a champion against so-called abortion rights. There's even a movie about her experience entitled Unplanned, which I don't think we've watched.
I told you I can't. I watched the trailer. I can't bring myself to watch it because of the content. I, for one, am against abortion. I mean, it's life to me. It's life. And in no way, shape, or form do I want to be subjected to watching, even on the big screen. You know, it's not real. This happens every single day.
Right.
I don't want to be subjected to and watch the killing of a life, even though it is for the cause,
right,
for a greater good of educating yourself.
Yeah. Well, she's problematic anyway, so I wouldn't watch the movie for that reason as well. But she's made numerous racist statements in the past. She's also a MAGA and Trump enthusiast. She's been pretty vocal against, wearing masks and social distancing and everything closing during the pandemic. So she's a whole mess of problems. I take issue with referring to her as a pro-life celebrity, or even just as being pro-life.
Right. I think she's a walking, talking oxymoron.
Yeah. So that segues into the video, My Biracial Boy. Basically, in this video, she lets the world into her thinking process, into the way she sees her biracial son. So here's a quote that really stood out to me. She says, her adorable, perpetually tan-looking little brown boy, but one day he's going to grow up and he's going to be a tall, probably sort of large, intimidating-looking, maybe brown man. So she's already...
Maybe as if his skin color is going to change. Is it going to turn purple? Is it going to turn green? What other color would it change to? And would that other color be better than black?
Right.
I mean, let's just call it what it is.
But that's not even the real issue. She's already saying, like, her son's going to grow up and be intimidating looking because he's black.
Yeah.
And then she goes on to say that she studies statistics, which, yeah, that's not true at all based on what she's saying. But let's give her the benefit of the doubt. I would like for her to share her research that she's apparently done. But she says that black men are in jail in large numbers for violent crimes. So therefore, a police officer who encountered her grown-up son, her grown-up biracial son, would be, quote-unquote, smart to be careful with her son because he could potentially be violent. He could potentially be a violent offender.
Because of the color of his skin.
Exactly, because he's black.
So this white officer has every right to be intimidated by her black son, is what she's saying.
Exactly, and she says that would not make her angry at all. She would understand. That would be reasonable based on statistics.
I want to know who the hell, in what court of law, gave this woman this precious black child to raise.
Exactly. So by contrast, she says her two white sons would grow up to be nerdy looking and pose no threat whatsoever. So the police would not be scared of her two sons, her two white sons. So this is completely disgusting and horrific. And I think for the pro-life movement, they need to kick her to the curb because she's quite problematic, clearly racist. And I think I have a lot of concern, I would say, for her son, her biracial son, growing up with a woman who thinks this way.
I just hope and pray that her two white sons grow up to be more intelligent, more educated, more compassionate, more loving than their ignorant mother.
For sure. And I want to thank Simca Fisher for reporting on this video. You can check out her website, simcafisher.com, for more. She has the video, the transcript of the video, and then she had a roundtable discussion with black men and black women to kind of dissect and reflect on Abby Johnson's video.
That's good.
I watched it. It's about an hour long.
Okay.
So, yeah, check out the video. I encourage you. So,
yeah.
That's my Fred Talk.
All right.
It's a lot. It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it is pretty heavy and pretty enraging, I would think, to anyone who's got common sense or compassion in their heart or just an ounce of love for just unborn life. But black life, I just can't even.
That segues nicely into your Fred Talk.
Yes, my Fred Talk. I'll be talking about Emmanuel Acho. I love watching stuff on YouTube. I have many different programs. And I came across his show, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. Now, first, Emmanuel Acho is a former NFL linebacker who played for the Cleveland Browns and Philadelphia Eagles. And now he just has this show that I think is just what we need right now, as far as being a love bridge between white people and black people and bridging that gap and having those uncomfortable conversations and educating ourselves and understanding one another. But it's really about white people understanding blacks and everything that they've gone through and the ripple effect that it's had that's led us to now. The first episode that I watched was with Matthew McConaughey. That was my introduction to the show. And if you have not watched the show, please watch. Look it up on YouTube. Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. The first episode I watched was with Matthew McConaughey. It was amazing. I loved Matthew's questions to Emmanuel. You know, what can I do as a white man? What is my responsibility? What is your responsibility? And so to watch them have dialogue and go back and forth and really have a good understanding of one another and informing each other and just having the conversation for you and I to watch, for everyone to watch, was just so eye-opening to me. And I feel like my eyes just keep getting bigger and bigger as far as being awake and open. just diving deeper into oneself, me for sure, how I can learn more, how I can be better, not just for me entirely, but for, my Black brothers and sisters as well. And I call them my Black brothers and sisters because I believe that we are all made in God's image. They are a reflection of Him, as am I, and we then make up one body. And so I'm just appalled at where we are in this day and age and how far we have yet to go in this country. It's just upsetting.
Right.
So one thing that really did stand out to me in the midst of their conversation together was Matthew quoted a Langston Hughes poem, and that poem is titled, "Let America Be America Again."
Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free.
That's powerful. That's the realest thing that I've truly heard, because it's acknowledging America, we've never been what we've aspired to be. We can be, but it's going to take this, and it's going to take those watching this to imitate this.
It was just very profound and very relevant as to now and what is yet to come. I really took a lot away from just that particular episode.
Right.
With Emmanuel and Matthew McConaughey, and there are other episodes as well.
So 2 things I just want to add to that. One, white people need to be okay with being uncomfortable. I keep saying this. White people are limiting the conversation to what makes them comfortable.
Yes.
Oh, you're talking about white privilege, or oh, you're talking about racism. These things make me feel uncomfortable. Therefore, that's where the conversation needs to stop, and now you're being extreme. Instead of saying, like, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you talk and tell me about what you have actually experienced. Not just data and numbers and figures, but what have you experienced as a Black American?
Right.
And then 2, to what Matthew McConaughey said, we are a nation of promise and hope. So we have never fulfilled the promise.
Correct.
It's always kind of in the distance, like a mirage.
Yes.
And I think the thing with America is, it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. And so it's taken us hundreds of years to get to this point.
Right.
It's injustice after injustice, but the goal is always, we will get there. We're not yet there.
Right.
But the hope is that one day we will get there.
Yeah. And in this particular moment in time with all that's going on, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And we need to be listening.
Yeah.
We need to listen more and talk less when it comes to wanting to understand, to be better. I just think listening to people's experiences and what's gone on is so beneficial to our learning and understanding. And of course we need to be vocal about things, but it would do us a great amount of good to listen right now.
How can love conquer hate when it dwells so deep within?
Where they would rob the lawful possessor, distort the functions of the state, and create utter confusion in the community. And now for utter confusion, I introduce to you Sam Rocha.
So let me ask you this then. This is maybe a controversial question. But okay, this is horrible. But let me ask it. Can a good Catholic also be a true capitalist? In the truest sense.
I mean, here we should be generous to the possibilities of capitalism, right? Is true capitalism like should I do to my to this perceived capitalist what Trent does to the socialist? No, I don't think I should. I don't believe the true capitalist is a Randian. I don't believe the true capitalist is an anarcho-capitalist. I don't believe the true capitalist is Mark Cuban. I don't believe the true capitalist is Donald Trump. I believe the true capitalist is probably someone who believes in the value of hard work and the virtues that come from a certain kind of fiscal responsibility and a kind of common sense understanding of the limits of certain resources. Like my grandpa was a lifelong Democrat and lifelong, but like he wouldn't shop at Walmart because Walmart, as a small business owner, it broke something sacred for him about the American way of life. It was un-American to him to shop at Walmart, and he would go and pay double somewhere else. He was a small business owner who had a good Mexican restaurant. Like, I mean, he could afford that, but like for him, there was something moral about that. And like, it took me a long time to appreciate that. Like he was a capitalist. He had a small business. He paid a lot of people. Did he pay them as much as they deserved? Well, I'd like to think he paid them as much as he could afford to pay them. He abided by the law. He paid them certainly more than minimum wage, a market price. I think my grandfather was a good Catholic and a true capitalist in this sense. But I also believe that he was haunted by certain realities about capitalism, like Walmart, like monopolies, that were morally offensive to him. And I feel like today, capitalism is real and it's not going anywhere. And I don't believe it makes any sense for even a socialist like me to act high and mighty about it. We're having this interaction over Skype. I'm talking into an RE20 microphone. I am very well paid at this university. I grew up poor, so I kind of value a dollar. So it makes no sense to me to like kick off on the capitalists. I just wish though that the people who speak on behalf of capitalism were half as morally concerned as my grandfather was, or as they are about a kind of communism that, frankly speaking, is off the table in American society, right?
Right, but that's the boogeyman that they always go to.
Of course.
So when Barack Obama puts forth, a healthcare plan that's basically maintaining private industry,
totally,
that's socialism.
Yeah. Well, I hate Obamacare because it's capitalist.
Well, see, there you go. Yeah.
Like
so
I
much for
believe
being socialist.
I know. I believe in single payer, And by the way, it's not because of like what I like. It's just because, a lot of people who didn't have insurance got it, but not everyone. And if we believe in the preferential option for the poor, then our healthcare system is only as good as how it serves those who have the least access to it. And to me, Obama maybe improved, but he didn't get there. Like, the boogeyman thing, though, is real, and it's called Red Scare. Like, it's a documented historical fact that the U.S. has done this. To me, what's interesting about that is, like, right now, you can even see on the Matt Fradd and Horn interview, is they're not just talking about socialism. They're also talking about Black Lives Matter and BLM. And there's become this new narrative that BLM is communism. To me, it's kind of a bit wonky, right? Like, they cite like a website or like some, this or that, but that like, anyone who proclaims that Black Lives Matter is in some sense endorsing Marxist ideology or whatever. We shouldn't insult people's intelligence, I don't think, to say like, this is clearly propaganda style. I mean, if you want to say that, like, again, you need a lot more evidence to be able to get away with that. And so I think another side of this is that it's very clear that like, Catholics in America cannot be told you can't be like a member of the Democratic Party because there's lots of them, and that you can't vote for Democrats because a lot of Catholics do. But there's become this narrative that started, I believe, with both like the Reagan movement, especially amongst like in the Latino community, especially the Cubans, right? Because they're all anti-Catholic. So like I give Cubans a lot of leeway on this stuff. I have a lot of friends of mine in Florida, and like I actually See, for them, when they go flip out about socialism, it's because their families left behind an entire life. When Batista and Castro showed up and rebuilt themselves from the ground up and stuff like that. And so, like, someone like that with a story like that, I'm much more comfortable with being like, yeah, dude, you should probably be a capitalist because, like, you have like some real beef,
Yeah.
But these people who don't have that kind of reaction, who react so strongly, I think they're more reacting to, like I said before, a kind of propaganda. And my worry in the church is that propaganda within the church comes with these heavy moral overlays because we have concepts like sin and salvation. And before you know it, you can have people walking around believing that, like, if I read Karl Marx, or if I vote for a Democrat, or if I say, maybe healthcare is like a human right, that not only will I be like wrong on politics, but like maybe I'm going to hell. Maybe I am bad, or maybe I can't take communion on Sunday. These are burdens on the conscience that, to be completely honest, Catholics in other countries think is bonkers. They're just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a GoFundMe situation all over again. Like, how do you all think that? All my friends in other countries thought this debate was stupid. And not because Trent, not because of me or Trent. Because whenever they see socialists, they see a viable party within their country that you can choose to associate freely with or not. And Catholics in every country socialist party have like a wing of that party usually, except for in the United States.
Yeah. So, okay. In the debate with Trent, he brought up that there really aren't socialist countries in Europe. Like, I think he mentioned Sweden, where
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're pushing more forward, where you maintain in some sense capitalism, but there's a socialist quality to it?
Yeah, I think Trent and I probably agree on this, with one exception. So Trent believes that support of social welfare programs is not the same as being a true socialist. To me, this is patently absurd, especially because he clearly is against Medicare for all, because that's one of the examples of the hospitals. Medicare for all is a provision of healthcare as a part of what the welfare state offers, right? Every country in the world today does that, with the exception of the United States. And even some states in the United States do offer that. So, like in Texas, we have the CHIP program, which is for really poor people, because I was a CHIP kid. WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children. So he wants to say, like, those programs, WIC and CHIP and Medicare and Medicaid, those don't count as socialism. Well, how do you think those things were invented? Like, who brought that policy forward? Whose politics motivated them to write that bill or to commit themselves to the years of activism that brought that case before the Supreme Court or whatever? I know who. Socialists.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, in terms of the United States, I don't buy Trent's idea about welfare not being socialist, because while yes, it's true, we should make a distinction between advocacy for socialist policy as opposed to advocating for sort of all things considered some kind of a socialist. But socialists today are kind of people who say all we do is advocate for policy. Like, the DSA basically exists to troll the Democrats to the left. That's all they do, right? So when we get to Sweden or to the Nordic countries, those are welfare states that benefit on a very robust capitalist economies, and also, by the way, very small demographics. They're mostly look the same and speak the same 7 languages. But I don't think it's fair to say that the socialist politics and parties in those countries haven't had everything to do with their incredibly high minimum wage, with their incredibly low hour work days and work weeks, with their incredibly high periods of maternity leave and of vacation. You see what I mean? Like, those things don't just pop out of nowhere. They come from pressure that usually comes from people defending labor politics or social politics or social democracy. So, but I would agree with Trent, though, that capitalism has a positive role to play there. And that's part of what it means to be a democratic, capital D, socialist, is that you're not an autocratic socialist, you're a democratic socialist.
I don't think he understood what you meant. So he was confused, I think, when you were mentioning that, you want to appeal to the community or to, like, the people. not necessarily have everything owned by the state. You're not a statist.
Yeah.
What's the difference there? Because he seemed confused.
Well, I mean, I think in some ways, I don't think he actually understood the meaning of democracy politically. He took it to be like majority rule because that's what he asked me. And I was quick to correct him on the language, which like the etymology of the word democracy in Greek, demos kratos, means people power. But that doesn't tell you a lot about what it means. It just kind of corrects the one thing. It was a bit of a kind of a quick move I used. What I meant though is that like democracy simply means that there's some adequate and proportional way for the voice of the people to express itself into the form of governance. And you'll notice that in the American elections system, for instance, we don't have a direct democracy. We have a representative democracy. And even at federal elections, we don't count the votes and then take the one who gets the most. Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump did. She lost because of a deeply socialist institution called the Electoral College, which redistributes the value of one vote according to particular zones and allocations that ultimately are allocated at a state level. So North Dakota, which is the least populous state in the country, is actually given more power than it actually has so that it doesn't suffer from the, wait for it, alienation of being disenfranchised, and so that the country isn't just run by LA and New York City, right?
Right.
I know the Electoral College is kind of controversial on the left. A lot of people want to abolish it. I like the Electoral College. I think it needs to be adjusted, but the reason I like it are for socialist principles. It allows for people who live in rural communities and in low populated states to not feel alienated from their country because they have no capacity to affect its governance. And so that to me is an example of democracy. It's not a majority decision. It's how do we proportionally allocate so that all the people feel like they have some power? Because whenever the people in North Dakota feel like they have no power, they're going to suffer the moral effects of alienation, blah, 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 so on and so forth. So to me, the meaning of democracy is how do you give people the guarantee of power, of political power? And that's what demos kratos, people power, means. There's a lot of different ways to proportion that. And yes, there are majority, minority. It does come down to numbers at some level, but those quantities are also qualitative. And that's what I think democracy really means in the real world. Parliamentary style governments, representative, all kinds. That's why we have a bicameral system with the judiciary, and it's balancing power, right? And those powers come from certain electoral processes. And so, like, to me, like, it was kind of a civics problem with Trent, that he didn't understand the meaning of democracy, how it functions realistically in the real world, like you were talking, and then how a socialist who puts democracy as the qualifier criteria for their socialism is like, look, we don't want the state or some authority that's not the people's power deciding for the minimum wage to go up. We only want the minimum wage to go up to $15 like it is in Seattle and in the state of Washington, if and only if we can create enough people power to express itself appropriately through the mode of government in order for these changes to come up. And that's why socialists like the DSA or even the Democratic Party to some extent lobbies on behalf of these social policies, right? That's the meaning of socialism. I think everybody knows this. I don't know why it was so difficult,
Yeah, that was a really bizarre moment. I love Trent, and I have been following him for years, and I've read some of his
smart guy
his tracks.
And a good debater, by the way. I mean, he wrote out all those responses. I sent him my case like the same moment I sent it to everyone else. It was like a half hour before we started. And he was like loaded, like ready to go the moment we started. Like he was reading manuscripts. Like I have a lot of respect for his intensity, his ability to think on the spot, and clearly, debate is something he's really excels at. I called him a pro because I've been watching him on YouTube. I have to say, I seen him debate people, and you think he's my opponent, so I would kind of root against him. I didn't root for him, but every debate I saw him have, he won in my view. He took people apart in cross-examination. I mean, he's a formidable person, and I have an enormous amount of respect for him.
I absolutely totally agree with everything you just said. But I think there is almost like a political filter sometimes when he approaches certain issues to where it's almost like a handicap. Because I think he's coming from like a politically conservative angle.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's fine. We all have our political persuasions and
That's
biases.
why I asked him the question I asked him at the beginning of my cross-examination, which is like, tell me more about like your emotions, your feelings, your intuitions that make you feel so strongly about socialism that you're writing the book and taking the debate and stuff.
Yeah.
And he gave a helpful response. He sees this as an objective, clear-cut, defined matter. Definition again, right? He sees it on the same level as abortion or other things. And I in some ways agree with him that, like, yeah, if you're a part of Catholics for Choice, you have a real uphill climb. You can think you're right. You can believe that in the long term you're going to be redeemed by the light of history. But it's not reasonable if you want to say that you're working within a kind of hermeneutic of continuity, orthodox framework. Like, you have to, in some sense, dissent openly. There's a place in the church for dissent. It's not my thing, but you have to be open about it, right? I think he believed that the only way to be a socialist and Catholic is in the same dissenting way. And my claim is, no, you can be faithful, you can be devout, and you can accept the church's teaching with humility and in all the ways that we should, I believe, accept the church teaching. And that was a proposition that I think he found and still continues to find difficult to imagine.
Right. Well, I think because for him, he sees it as a slippery slope into totalitarianism.
Sure.
Like socialism is the Trojan horse.
Yeah. He makes that argument in his book too. It's not terribly unreasonable. I mean, like I said in the debate, I'd fully admit that like socialism was born in the same moment and from the same kind of pot of stew that communism and Marxism came. Here's the thing though, when you jump into that pot, instead of kicking it down you realize there are a whole bunch of other things in there too, including Catholics. We were there at the beginning. People think Rerum Novarum is the moment when Catholics started talking about the real world. That's not true at all. The church has maybe not always communicated globally, but it's always had its finger on the pulse, and it's affected even the world in many ways. The church in the 19th century was deeply appalled at industrialism. I mean, industrialism was in some sense the pinnacle of modernism, and the church was very anti-modern at that time, so.
I also think it was the pinnacle of capitalism. Well, maybe a particular kind of capitalism.
Industrial capitalism, yeah, for sure.
That exploited labor.
Yeah, and also tore apart certain social institutions like the family and rural societies. So it forced people into cities, and concentrated people into those kind of formations, which disrupted in some sense the church's kind of geopolitical presence, in many ways. But it's a fascinating study. I wish more people would be like not scared to like take off the gloves, chill out, and dive into the history of the 19th century in Europe and read deeply, and not just from people who are trying to sell you something, but just really try and understand what that scene was like. I've even taught, I'm going to come out as a Marxist professor. I've even taught Marx's Das Kapital Volume 1 as recently as this last fall. It is a fascinating text. He's mainly talking about the laws prohibiting children from working in factories. Mm-hmm. Who's for that again? Like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of the concerns he has, I think, are legitimate and moral. And he doesn't talk as much about some of the things you might think. It's also really boring. He goes through tons of statistics. He's also deeply concerned, by the way, with an institution called chattel slavery, which is supplying a lot of the raw products, and that is disappropriating goods from the Americas and from India and the UK, and then later, especially in the French, in Africa. And he's like, look, surplus value doesn't just come from exploiting workers. It also comes from stealing people's stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a part of capitalism, by the way, that capitalists are really historically unable to account for, is how much of the engine of industrial capitalism wasn't coming from the factories, but was actually coming from the capacity of these capitalist states to go into other places and literally steal and expropriate capital, and also take people from other places, put them in other places, enslave them and not pay them, and then be able to develop more surplus value on the fact that the raw goods were really cheap because obviously you're not paying anyone. I mean, these are the things that people who are concerned about like the moral things of economy, I think should be deeply worried about. Because like today, I mean, I know like you're Mexican, I'm Mexican, like, you know, a lot of our brothers and sisters are out working in fields that no one else will go to, no one else will work on, and no one else will do. And they're treated to this day in ways that no OSHA, no union, no, and the reason is because they're desperate and because the market, such the cruel market, allows for this to happen. And it's even happening here in Canada. I didn't know this, but there's actually people who come up over here to Abbotsford and areas here. And so even the Canadian, you know, white people don't like to pick their vegetables here too. Right. And so like whenever I think of slavery, I think of chattel slavery, obviously. And I think BLM is a big opens our heads to the way that, you know, and when you go to confession and you confess murder, you still have temporal punishment. You still got to go to jail. Yeah. God forgives you, but you have to pay. You have to pay restitutions. That's a Catholic teaching. Whenever you enslave people for hundreds of years and then segregate them for another 100 years, 50 years, 65 years after the fact, you don't get to be like, it's in the past. No, temporal punishment is a real moral concept. BLM is waking us up to the fact that we have not dealt with the sin of racism in this country. And I think that extends into questions of like not only the enslaved people, but anyone who is working under pain of force or feeling not free. You know, it's the migrant workers, it's people, you know, picking strawberries and apples and stuff like that. And, you know, for whatever reason, the American Catholic Church has been on the side of the migrant worker morally and pastorally, but not so much as politically.
Sadly, I think because the abortion issue has been so paramount, you know, and there was that, I don't want to go down too much this rabbit hole, but, you know, Cardinal Dolan on the phone with Trump, basically telling Trump like, hey, I call you more than I call my mother. Like there is this weird alliance between. I
mean, I like Cardinal Dolan.
So do I. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I played at a youth conference whenever he was the Bishop of Milwaukee, and I sure liked him then. And when I remember seeing him though, he was electric. I was like, man, this guy's not going to be in Milwaukee forever. But I think there's something deeper maybe than because I also don't like this whole like blame the bishops for everything, because there is a democratic sense in the church. It's called the sensus fidei, the sense of the faithful, right? And we are the church, right? And so to me the question is that like, let's just take our community. Like how many Mexican Americans are Catholic? Tons. Yeah. Everybody knows this. Why is the mainstream Catholic voice and face and identity and politics so starkly white? Yeah. And not even particularly ethnic. Like it's not like if it was like all like Italian and Irish and like that would make sort of some sense, right? You know, but it's very like kind of like Americanized, whitewashed, mainstream, you know, Raymond Arroyo.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Like who knows? Arroyo, like maybe the dude's like raza, like, you know, but it's about a certain aesthetic presentation. Because as we know, Latinos, we can kind of, you know, we can hit the bat from both sides. We can play white as well and pass. What I'm trying to, not if you wear Guayabera though, bro, you're gonna have to put on the polo shirt, man.
Yeah, I'm out.
Yeah, you got to put on the good golf cap like I'm wearing. You know, my point though is that like. I think it's a real question that, and in Latin America, you see this too, that like the curia and the authorities tend to be very light mestizos or criollos, and you know, the indígena, the real brown, you know, doesn't, and you see it in political leadership. And I think that these things, on the one hand, I do worry sometimes because I actually am quite averse to identity politics, you know, and I attended Franciscan. I'm like, you know, I think I was given a lot of opportunities from the culture that in some sense I might be said to being critical of. But at the same time, I'm also I'm not from there. That's not like who I am. And so I became very uncomfortable in the kind of Steubenville culture with the fact that like, man, Life Teen is for upper middle class and upper middle class suburban white kids.
Yeah.
You know, now do the suburbs have people of color? And so, yeah, obviously, like,
Yeah.
the times are changing. Yet there's still this cultural aesthetic, right, that comes across. And there's still this feeling that like when I go to Steubenville South, I need to like kind of be kind of white. And as a guy who like knows how to be whatever you need me to be, like I know how to do that. And it's cool. And I like being white sometimes. Like it's the thing, you know?
Yeah. You're like a chameleon.
Right. And
Yeah.
you know, and you do what you need to do. But like, you know, I gave this example in the previous podcast where like I played basketball on a cement slab that was the former foundation for a chapel called La Capilla de Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe. That was the Mexican church, and St. Patrick's was the white church. And they had a segregated, and in West Texas, this was the norm. There was like a Mexican smaller chapel. And you could see growing up, I don't know how it is in California, but in Texas, like we still have bilingual masses, and a parish will have like a Spanish mass and then an English mass. And like as a music minister and as growing up in this, you see these cultural tensions, you know,
Yeah.
like at the Our Father, where if they're saying it in English, you know, a little viejita will say it in Spanish, you know, and if they're saying it in Spanish, you know, someone will say it in English, and maybe it's because it's what they know best, but sometimes there's an edge on that, you know, and I think these are things that the mainstream culture doesn't understand. But in terms of like the politics of socialism and of the left, well, it just so happens that like there is a broad coalition of working class people of color. By the way, many times in coalition with very poor white people. This is one thing people don't realize. Man, no one is as anti-fascist as like Woody Guthrie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there is a real deep American white left culture that is not professors like me and stuff, but this is like straight up workers, you know, and folk music and that kind of stuff. But all I'm trying to say here is that like that is obviously not the cultural aesthetic of Catholicism TM on Catholic radio and in the media and in the mainstream of Catholic culture. But I've always seen it as one of many things that I might do in my life as a cradle Catholic who loves the church and who loves the American church, is to start to move some of this social capital that I've been blessed with to kind of open up the window a bit to see that.
Yeah. When we had Trump elected and there were some fears about ICE in our community, you know, I actually teach, we talked about this earlier, I teach junior high, eighth grade U.S. history. And our students are overwhelmingly Mexican American. A lot of them actually are children who were brought here by their parents from Mexico.
Yeah,
a lot of them. They're dreamers. Like sometimes recently.
Yeah.
And so when Trump was elected, this was a very real fear for a lot of our students, actually, that they might be deported, their parents could be deported, what have you. And so I went and talked to the priest, the pastor of my church, and I was like, dude, you guys need to like step up your game, reaching out to ICE. And thank God he's like, we're already doing that. We're having meetings with ICE.
Yeah.
So that gave me a huge sigh of relief there, because I want our church to be more in touch with the community, as you said, which many times is so brown, but forgotten.
Yeah. Although, you know, you're totally right. I was focused more on the church's neglect of workers and labor politics, but I think on immigration, the church has led in a useful way. Whenever the issue of immigration comes up, the church, and I'm here talking about like the United Council of the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops. You know, I know I actually know the bishop. He's the bishop of Austin. I grew up. He was a pastor in San Angelo. I grew up knowing him, Joe Vasquez. But this is a new thing as well. Like, you know, the Latin American Latino bishops are a new face on the mainstream of Catholic culture, and I think that things take time. I'm actually not a radical. I believe it's good to take time because that way people's consciences can form and you can kind of be awakened to moral truth of things. But yeah, on immigration, I think that's a position that is actually really a really bright white line. Like I'm almost willing to let's concede questions of political economy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about immigration, right?
Yeah.
And not just Mexicans and Guatemalans and Hondurans, but like refugees and how we feel about the global church, the church that's not American. And I think there you get a really strong read as well of a certain ideology that does pervade the culture, but that I do believe, and this is what's been so encouraging to me about Black Lives Matter, as tragic and as hurtful as the events that spurred it on were, is I'm seeing people speaking up as Catholics. And I'm not just talking about Black people or Indigenous people or people of color or Latinos or whatever. I mean, white people stepping in and standing in where they would have stood back or where they might have asked some questions and standing in solidarity with us. And I think that's really important. And I believe that the Catholic has all the moral foundation to do that. And I think we're going to see more of it. I really do. I'm hopeful.
Yes, that's the one thing that I do. As we wrap up, because I've kept you way beyond the time I said I would keep you, but
No worries.
I think
I talk a lot.
I totally appreciate, as I'm learning so much from you here in this conversation. But hope, I think, is what we have to hold on to moving forward in these troubled times right now. As we wrap up, just one final question. I kind of was thinking about this after the debate. Is the label socialism even useful anymore? Can we just move forward with those policies or with that spirit without using the term because it's become so loaded?
It's only become loaded in communities that have people who claim that it can't be said.
Mm-hmm.
So,
like in the United States.
In the United States, yeah, it's a U.S. thing. Now, obviously, it's going to be a different thing everywhere, but I don't like the idea of getting rid of socialism. And I like the fact that the word socialist has kind of been put back into the public square by people like AOC and David Bentley Hart and like a lot of different kinds of people. People forget that as soon as AOC was elected, her first public word was in America Magazine.
That's right.
Jesuits.
She was advocating for prison reform or something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So she's part of the church as well. And I feel like the word socialism, precisely because it's an irritant, shows me that it needs to stay. Because socialism, unlike capitalism, which has a kind of a utopian vision of the market and the good life emerging from that. Also communism, which has a utopian vision of the revolution and the abolition of classes, like anarchy and the abolition of the state. Socialism actually doesn't have a constructive project. It is simply a reaction and a critique of the overdeterminations of certain capitalist utopianism, certain communist utopianism, certain fascist ethno-theocratic utopian visions. The anarchists, frankly, have never gotten any traction. But if they did, I think the socialists would have a response to that. But that's what socialism means. And it's meant to irritate people. And I think the fact that it's still irritating them and the fact that the American discourse pushes so strongly, it's more reason for that. But I do believe that if you want to substitute for socialism, because Jacques Maritain, he was a French philosopher, Thomist. He knew Mounier. They were both French. So all French people know each other. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But Mounier advocated for Christian socialism and Catholic socialism under his banner of personalism. Maritain agreed with pretty much all of Mounier's principles, but he wasn't willing to concede Christian socialism. He chose to stay with what he called Christian democracy, or Catholic Christian democracy, really. And I think that's also good. Another way to express this in less political terms is what you might call Christian humanism or Catholic humanism. We often think of humanism as being secular and kind of John Lennon, but there is a tradition of Christian humanism and Catholic humanism that both Mounier and Maritain would be a part of. These are eligible substitutes, but I would say to the person who's like, man, I agree with all this stuff, I just don't want to use like the word socialist. Part of the reason why these changes are needed is precisely because they're going to be like the Magnificat. They're going to confront power. And I don't think it's a good idea to be too worried because one's language confronts the powerful. I think as a Christian, we're called to be bold and to proclaim with Mary something that's going to actually irritate the powerful. So the moment that Trent Horn is not interested in debating me is the moment where I'm not interested in being a socialist anymore. The moment that Catholic Answers isn't, printing this book, and that this kind of cultural response isn't the go-to scare card.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that's the moment we can drop it and we can move on to something else. But you are right that, like, for me, I'm much more attached to probably personalism than I am to socialism. My socialism is simply an affiliation in terms of my political associations, but at the heart of it, it's my understanding of the person. And I believe that there is no such thing as an individual. Persons are always in relation, and persons like the person, like God in the Trinity. To be a person is to be in a relationship. And that's why I ended, by the way, with Hebrew scripture and the idea that God didn't create alone. He consulted with the angels, Rashi says. So that's why he said, let us create man in our image. So for me, socialism is motivated not really by the politics, but by this idea of the true nature of the human person, which I believe is always opposed to individualism and also opposed to a kind of negative idea of freedom.
Yeah, and I like the idea kind of along those lines of whether it's socialism or whether it's Catholic social justice, that our goal should be to comfort the afflicted and then afflict the comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm not a socialist. I'm still learning about all these things myself, but the aspiration in terms of providing the basic needs for human beings made in the image of God, that is so attractive to me, especially when it comes to capitalism, when you put money or capital ahead of people.
Yeah.
That to me is just so wrong.
I mean, to me, there's no more radical prayer in our tradition than the Magnificat. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior, for he has looked with favor on his humble servant. From this day, all generations will call me blessed, and the Almighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. He has mercy on those who fear him in every generation. He has shown the strength of his arm. He has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones and has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. I mean, what else?
Beautiful.
What else are we supposed to believe and practice as Catholics? And I guess, look, I believe in realities more than words. That's why I took the approach I took to language in the debate. So, as I think about your question, yeah, I guess I'm willing to say that, I'm not going to stop saying socialist because it annoys people. But if you're not as annoying as I am, sure, don't be a socialist. But don't you dare think that the ethos that we find in the Magnificat is optional to your faith.
Yeah, exactly. I used to do the Liturgy of the Hours.
Mm-hmm.
I loved reciting the Magnificat because of that. It is very radical. It's very revolutionary.
Ooh.
And
Fill
it's
the hungry
2000.
with good things.
Exactly.
And the rich he has sent away empty.
Yeah, beautiful. That's a good place to end right there, Sam.
Nice.
Thank you so much. God bless you for your time. I will continue to follow all of your amazing tweets. Where can our listeners find more of your work?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have a website, just my name, Sam Rocha, SamRocha.com. There's a long bio. The homepage is usually something I'm sharing. So right now I have my debate case still up if people want to read the negative case I wrote for that, and they can see the link. I think next to it I have a little song that I wrote recently that's a SoundCloud link. You can read my bio, which is really long because no one knows me. So you can download my academic CV. And if you want to follow links, there's a links that just takes you to everything from music to academic articles to all kinds of stuff. I think a person who might want to see what I thought, probably more than what I think, but also what I think, or the foundation of where these ideas come. I have a book of essays I published in 2017 called Tell Them Something Beautiful.
Oh.
It was endorsed by David Bentley Hart, some other people, including a Jesuit priest who I think is kind of identifies as a kind of a liberation theologian. But I think that book supplies my thoughts on things. I think one will also be surprised to see that I'm definitely less socialist in that book, to be honest, than I am now. But if anyone was interested, I think that would be a decent book. If someone is interested in maybe my thoughts on education and philosophy, I have a really short book called A Primer for Philosophy and Education. I use it a lot with like student teachers and teacher candidates when I teach them here. But yeah, it's all open. In 2014, I put out the world's first Augustinian soul album. It's a power trio soul interpretation of Augustine's Confessions. That's out on all digital outlets. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. But mainly, I'm popping off on Twitter all the time. And the main thing though is I'm really blessed as a tenured academic that like I'm not in a position where I need to make a living off of this. So if anyone finds himself like unable to afford something or would like resources that they couldn't otherwise get or whatever, I'm always happy to find a way to get them whatever they need. So don't be shy. And really what I'm doing here is a project of love for the church. And thankfully, I have a day job.
That is awesome. And just by way of kind of affirming everything you're doing, I'm in the middle of watching your other debate with Professor Webb.
Yeah, Steve.
You guys look like you're really good friends. You have great banter back and forth. So
yeah, I don't want you to feel bad about this. It's really beautiful that you bring this up, and I want to thank you for bringing it up. That happened whenever I was at Wabash College, which was my first place. And believe it or not, the Newman Center, which is all these Catholic, Midwestern mainly kids, men. It was a men's college, so there were no women there. But they wanted us to talk about Catholic social teaching and economics, right? So people saying that this is a new idea that happened in the last 2 years, that was like 2011 or 12. It's a tragic thing for me to watch because Webb was my friend. He passed away, took his life.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
No, but it's really important though, because whenever I was preparing for this, I felt guilty that I was seeing Trent debating, and I was like, man, this guy's got no intel on me, and I'm over here just like benefiting from all this. He's all over the place. So I was like, and I remembered, but I debated Steve, man. So I'll send him my debate with Steve. And when I did that, I watched it again, and it was very, it was healing for me to watch it again and to see that Steve is such a great example to me of someone who was dyed-in-the-wool conservative. He was just, he was an iconoclast. He wrote this crazy essay in First Things about how like soccer is ruining America. Like he was that kind of a guy,
Yeah.
And I deeply, deeply loved Steve and was crushed whenever he passed away. And I flew out for his funeral, and a lot of people from Wabash were watching my debate with Trent and remembering, our debate, who also loves Steve. Yeah. And, that was a real gift that I don't know when it'll be appropriate for me to tell Trent or Catholic that like there was something beyond the politics and the debate going on for me personally that was very meaningful, and at the same time too human to like break open. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and I know that you had no idea.
No, I feel horrible.
No, but I don't want you to, because it's something that I've actually been wanting to find a way to give some speech to and to talk in a way, because I think it's like at the core of this like radical mission. Some people believe that capitalists or people on the right cannot or do not love the poor. And Steve, to me, was always someone who the way he lived his life showed me by example that he deeply loved the poor. All I wanted to point out is that, like, I don't know Trent and he doesn't know me. And there's something kind of tragic about our debate, that we didn't get to be in the same room and that we don't know each other, and that we didn't have the benefit of eating lunch beforehand or grabbing beers afterwards, or there was something kind of inhumane I felt about the debate that I deeply actually regret, although it was no one's fault, right? Like, it's just the COVID world we're living in and stuff like that. But I think like my biggest critique of the debate, though, is that it was so different than my debate with Steve. Although Steve, after that debate with him, he didn't talk to me for 3 months.
Are you serious?
He was so mad at me because people were saying I won. And so, like, he got mad. But that was who he was. And that was so beautiful. That was such a beautiful part of our relationship, too, that like we were playing for keeps. In some sense, we went a lot harder at each other.
You did. But you guys had such, like I said, good banter. Like you guys were kind of being self-deprecating.
Yeah.
But also coming at each other.
Yeah.
It's a fun debate. It really is.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's something that I think it's the ideal for vigorous debate is the capacity to have friendship. Aristotle has this beautiful line in the Ethics where he says, "Among friends, there's no need for justice."
I love that. That's beautiful.
Ooh, it blows me away. And I think that like this is where when you drill into my personalism and my socialism and whatever, you do see that there is this kind of place where like, look, my aim isn't justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's beyond justice. It's love. It's friendship. And I know that that's impossible, but I do believe that it's practical to talk about these impossible things as the things that we search for. And so whenever I just watched the John Coltrane Netflix thing, and it talks so much about how like after the church in Alabama was blown up and those kids died, he recorded an album called Alabama that was largely based on Martin Luther King's sermon he gave there. But that for him, it was not just about mourning or political defiance or whatever. It was also this deeply human message of love. And like Coltrane's great magnum opus was Love Supreme.
Yeah.
And for him, that love, Coltrane understood that love to be divine love, to be directed at God. And like, to me, the person who made me a socialist was Benedict XVI.
Wow. I think some Catholic Answers people's heads are exploding right now.
Deus Caritas Est, where he picks up Nietzsche, the great atheist, and he kind of responds to his critique that Christianity inverts love and puts down Eros, and he brings up Eros. A few months later, he puts out this Ubi et Orbi address called The Mad Eros of the Cross, where he goes even further than he went in his encyclical. And he said, look, agape is Eros. He just breaks open the division. And that just blew my mind. And then I kept studying him, Spesalvi. I went back to Introduction to Christianity. And no contemporary mind has as deeply affected me as a person and as an intellectual as Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger and Benedict XVI. And it's his social vision that I believe is directed at this erotic divine love as its kind of maxim. And it's radical and it's out there and it's more than we can probably take in the everyday discourse. But I think it's like, I love the Catholic intellectual tradition, not just because I am Catholic, because that's just identity, right? I love it because it's deep and it's thick and it's millennia old. So anyway, that's why I'm doing all this, and that's why I'm so juiced up about it, and that's why I love to talk about it with people. And I'm glad you brought all that up, because by the way, Webb and I were both Roman Catholics.
Yeah, and I loved that he pulled open his shirt and there was that Obama, or was it Obama?
Yeah, it was Obama as Mao. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that cracked me up. But,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for dedicating so much time. Thank you for all of your work promoting basically just good Catholic social justice, and I appreciate everything you've done. And I hopefully we can cross paths again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to be back on with your partner. We can. He said he's got some different ideas than you do, so he can maybe give me a bit of a.
Yeah, he's the son of a Lutheran pastor. Joel. He's salt of the earth.
Cool.
He's the best part of the show.
That's awesome. Well, we'll get. Hopefully, I can get back in and talk to both of you sometime.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. No worries.
Take care, man.
All right, cheers.
Take my heart to my head, 'cause I know that instead I think too much. Sing her words in my ear, 'cause my soul needs to hear your gentle touch.
All right, so as we wrap up our show, I want to thank Sam for being our guest. I certainly learned a lot in our conversation, and I hope our listeners did as well. You can check out what he has to share on his website, samrocha.com. He's also on YouTube, Twitter, where he's popping off, and he's on Facebook. So, yeah, check out his stuff. It's great. Now, in this part of our show, we like to share something that we are watching or listening to or reading. This week, I wanted to discuss this amazing new Netflix show. It's climbed the charts. It's one of the best shows on Netflix, apparently, of all time, according to the ratings. The Floor is Lava.
Oh, my gosh.
We all have been, little kids climbing on our living room.
Couch surfing.
Yeah, and going, the floor is lava, and jumping from the couch to the chair, and coffee table to the ottoman, or whatever else, And so this show kind of brings our childhood games
into adulthood.
Yeah, because all the contestants are adults.
Yes.
And they're traversing this room, and the floor is quote-unquote lava. It's this kind of reddish-orange...
It's liquid. Whatever it is. I'm assuming it's water.
And when we watch the show, just spoiler, people fall into it and they disappear.
Yes, you don't ever see somebody come back or surface out of this lava.
No, you don't. So I don't know, where they go. I don't know if they cut the cameras and pull them out.
Is there someone down there?
Right.
Kind of pulling them down and leads them to, an exit? Or do they just... Or is it just cutscene... let them get out,
right.
And we just never see it. But, they disappear. They disappear.
They straight up...
For
yeah, they're gone.
All intents and purposes.
Yeah. But the courses, though, it's like the solar system, and you're jumping from planet to planet, and you're going to the console with a red button, or there's a rocket ship you're jumping on,
But there's ropes, too. There's ropes you can pull that then lets down another piece of furniture or something else that they can traverse, or
you're climbing across the inside of a canoe. You're using, the seats, like a monkey bar situation.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there like a crazy person yelling at the TV, go this way, no, don't go that way, use this, jump or hold on to the rope. And I'm giving them advice they can hear me through the TV.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, honestly, I would do really well.
Well, we're all chair experts.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is how I would do it, yeah. But, it's so fun. It's hilarious. I love watching people look on their face when they slip off an object and into the mysterious lava.
Well, I gotta mention, there's always, because it's usually in groups of 3. Mm-hmm. They have had a few episodes where it's just a couple, 2 people. But there's always that third person.
Mm-hmm.
You've got one person going this way, one person going the other way, and that one person who just doesn't want to get off that platform.
True. They're frozen.
They are frozen. They're very happy to just watch the other 2 navigate the course and learn from perhaps their mistakes. And it's like you gotta get some skin in the game. Literally, get in there and start doing something, because they're timed.
Yeah, they're timed.
They're timed as well,
and you get points for the number of contestants who makes it to the finish line.
Right.
But I always wonder: are the objects they're jumping onto or crash onto, are they solid? Are they foam?
And you can see. I don't know if you've noticed as much as I have, but they're foam-ish. Like kind of a harder foam.
They crash
even
hard.
Those crates have a little give.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you noticed that, but it's like, I can't imagine that those things are too solid, because they must sign a waiver, some sort of liability clause or paperwork or something. So
because those crashes,
sue.
They look painful.
Oh, yeah.
It totally reminded me of shows like Wipeout or Takeshi's Castle or MXC. These shows.
Okay, MXC is the original.
It's the OG.
It's the OG. MXC has a huge place in my heart. I mean, that was back in the day. So as far as I'm concerned, all these other shows are just counterfeit or ripoffs. But yeah, MXC, shout out, is the OG.
Yeah, those shows are a classic. MXC especially because they have the horrible dubbing.
Oh, that's the best part.
Yeah, it's horrible, which makes it hilarious because it's so bad. And I don't think that
Guy Ledouche.
Yeah. Exactly.
I can't remember the other guy's name, but
But they weren't as conscientious of their contestants because those looked painful, legit.
Yeah.
Like they're falling from high distances, they're getting hit by moving, revolving
Well,
arms.
I mean, everything had some sort of padding on it. It wasn't like savage, but
it looked painful nonetheless.
Yes, it did look painful. I think no matter how soft the surface is, there's going to be some pain.
There's an ouch factor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sit back, watch The Floor is Lava. It's a great family show, hilarious. Streaming now on Netflix. Check it out.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on our humble little podcast. You could do us a huge, huge favor by subscribing to our show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Stitcher, Podbean, Google Play, or Apple Podcasts. And be sure to rate our show and leave a review. Your rating will help others find this show. And be sure to find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Conversation on Tap. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Christina, for hosting. And cheers.
Cheers.
See you guys next week.